You know, my father taught me a whole lot about the law, but I think he taught me more about how to treat people and how it doesn't matter how somebody dresses or what kind of car they drive. Treat everybody, meet everybody where they live. And I think that's because my dad's humble beginnings, and he realized you can't judge a book by its cover. Let me tell you a little bit more about John personally. John Phillips Jr. is the son of John Phillips Sr. John Sr. was a co-owner of Durham Lumber Company here in Gallatin with former Tennessee State historian Walter Durham. And John has two brothers, Dan Phillips, who's Dr. Dan Phillips, he's an orthopedic surgeon, and George Phillips, who is an attorney who practices law with John now at their law firm, Phillips Ralston. Now, John's parents valued and emphasized education a great deal. Obviously, they raised two attorneys and a surgeon. They also emphasized discipline, and I think those things really informed a lot about who John is. John left Gallatin High School after he graduated Gallatin High School. He was a Green Wave just like me, and he played high school football there and ran track, and he went to Harvard in Boston. And he played rugby up at Harvard, and he made good grades and did well and graduated from Harvard. And he went to University of Tennessee College of Law, and that's where he met my father. Now, when he came back to Gallatin, as I said earlier in the video about my father, that's the real reason why we're here. And I feel like not only do I owe a lot of my legal knowledge to John, but I owe my hometown to John Phillips Jr. If it wasn't for John being from Gallatin, I would have never moved to Gallatin, which we moved here in 1976 when I was in kindergarten. And I love Gallatin. I love Sumner County, and I love the state of Tennessee. I was born in Virginia, like as I said before, on Quantico and Marine Base. But I love Tennessee, and my favorite teams are the Gallatin Green Wave, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Tennessee Titans. And so I owe those the love for all that a lot to John as well. Now, John came home, as I said, practiced law for a few years, 3 years, I think to be exact, with Charles Hill Beatty. And then my dad and John started practicing law together. When my dad would say, go ask John, I'm proud to say John never steered me wrong on the law or on the ethics or the civility, the civil practice of law. He didn't steer me wrong, and neither did my dad. These guys were both lions of the bar, the type of trial attorneys that you don't even really see anymore. They were some of the most respected people in not only the Sumner County bar, but in the entire mid-state, the whole state of Tennessee. John used to get hired a lot by big firms out of places like Atlanta and New York and Miami or whatever that had business in Middle Tennessee, because they would go to Martindale Hubbell, which was in these big bound volumes, and there was one for all 50 states, and they'd look in there for attorneys in the city or the county where the litigation was, and they'd look in there and they'd see John Phillips Jr., Harvard, University of Tennessee, and they'd see his offices on the square, and they're like, this sounds like our guy. And so he did a lot of work for big firms from other places. Now, if I would go and ask that question to John, if I said, John, what's the law on this or that? He'd always, never failed, he'd say, I think there's a statute on that. And he'd turn around behind his desk and he'd grab the green volume of Tennessee Code Annotated off the shelf, and he would flip right to the statute and he would read it to me. Now, that seems very basic, but what's important about that is John is saying, no matter how long you've been an attorney, no matter how much you think you know, always go back to the law, refer to the law in the code books, in the case law. If you come into my office and after you sit in the lobby and you walk back to my office, you're going to walk down a long hallway that is lined with a big bookshelf. And for years, we updated those law books year after year, month after month. I know at one point when I took over the Ingrum side of the law firm, we were looking at expenses, and we had spent over $500,000 on our law library from 1995 up until 2023. That's a lot of money on law books. Now, I'm proud to say that we also have computer legal research capabilities, and we rely on that now more than we do on the law books. But I think there's just something about being able to pick up the law and flip through the pages and look at it, and that's what John would do. And he would direct me to the law, and that always, I think, was the thing that sort of grounded me in always remain teachable. Never think you know everything. The law changes every year. Usually new laws come out either January 1 or July 1. The state house and the state senate are passing bills every single year. We're required to go do continuing legal education every year, at least 15 hours a year, 12 on the general law areas and 3 on ethics. But as I've said earlier, thank goodness, I'm not relying on 3 hours of ethics a year. I had my father and John Phillips Jr. to teach me about ethics. Here's some other specific sort of quotes that I would attribute to John Phillips Jr., things he taught me. He told me, never let some mythical perfect deal that doesn't exist be the enemy of a good deal that you have right before you. So he's saying, you know, if you think this mythical perfect deal in the wilderness, like Bigfoot riding on a unicorn, if you could have that, you would be the happiest person alive. That's never going to happen. The deal you've got in front of you is a good deal. It's his way of saying a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. So don't look that good deal, that gift horse in the mouth, and turn it away. You might ought to consider it. He also said this. He said, no matter how insignificant that you think someone is, remember that if you make an enemy out of them and they set their mind to hurt you, they can cause you a lot of damage, pain, and heartache. And I learned that the hard way one time. I had a client that I represented. He sought the advice of a jailhouse lawyer at the penitentiary where he was. And instead of asking my father and John about it, my 2 mentors, I decided to take matters into my own hands and write this guy a letter and tell him to stay out of my client's business and quit trying to give him legal advice when he wasn't a licensed attorney. Well, that jailhouse lawyer then writes a bunch of pleadings out and puts my name and address and phone number and bar number on it and mails them to me and asks me to file them on behalf of my client. Well, I got upset about that because I said, shoot, all he's got to do now is forge my name and file it. The clerk might not even be able to tell. So I wrote a letter to the guy's warden. Well, that got him in trouble. Now, remember, this guy's not my client. He's my client's friend. It gets him in trouble with his warden. So then that guy starts trying to extort me for money, saying he's going to sue me because I've gotten him in trouble and I violated his rights, and he's going to sue me in federal court, which I don't go to federal court. And so now I'm all worried about this guy maybe suing me having to hire an attorney to go to federal court. Well, if I would have left well enough alone and listened to what John said, is don't try to start a fight with somebody, even if you don't think they can hurt you. That guy was serving 44 years for second-degree murder, and all he had to do all day long is think about, how can I hurt Jay Ingrum? How can I get after him? And I learned that lesson the hard way. My client later told me that this same guy was trying to hire somebody to kill me. So, and that gentleman, I will tell you that the inmate who was trying to extort me and everything, and it was not my client, he since died in prison. But guess what? I still have the file that I made about that guy trying to extort me. Everything. It still sits on my credenza, and it's there in my law office as a reminder of this quote from John, that no matter how insignificant you think somebody is, they can do you some damage. And I think that's important for litigants to remember in cases. He'd also say things like, you don't have to accept an invitation to every fight that you get invited to. And he's, in other words, saying, pick your battles. Don't let the other side, the other client, the other party, or the other lawyer get you riled up, because it's important as a lawyer to stay unemotional and above the fray and to be reasonable and rational. And why is that so important? Because your client is already, their emotions are elevated. And so you're trying to stay calm and to be able to properly advise them. That's why there's another old saying that says, the attorney that represents himself has a fool for a client. Because if I'm representing myself, I'm too close to it. I'm too emotionally involved. If I had a legal issue, even though I could represent myself, I'm going to go hire somebody else, because I need to run it through the lens of that other person's point of view, because I may have on rose-colored glasses and see it the way I want to see it instead of the way an independent third party would. The other thing, and this really helped me with John, one time he said, I came back from court and I told him, I said, well, I lost in court. And he said, well, what do you mean you lost in court? I said, well, I thought it was going to turn out this way and it turned out another way. And John said, did you prepare? I said, yes, sir. He said, you do all you could do? I said, yes, sir. He said, did you make the facts? I said, no, the facts were what they were. He said, did you make the law? I said, no, the law was what it was. And he said, well, then you didn't lose. The facts lost. And he said, what you say in court, Jay, is argument conjecture. It's not proof. Proof comes in through the witness box, through witnesses in that box, and through exhibits put in through those witnesses. And so your client and the facts are either going to win or lose that case. Your job is to drive the bus and to try to get your client where they want to go by asking the right questions on direct and asking the right questions on cross-exam. And if you did that, you did everything that you could do. Attorneys that don't prepare, that are ill prepared, and who have not properly prepared their client for court and to know what to expect and to know not only what to say, but how to say it. Or if they're not saying anything, to not give silent testimony by rolling their eyes or scoffing at a ruling of the judge or an argument by the other attorney. That's a good way to get held in contempt of court. That's a good way to get kicked out of court. But if your lawyer doesn't warn you, you don't know that. So you want to try to do the very best you can do. Again, those are some of the lessons that my second mentor, John Phillips Jr., taught me. And I've got to say, and the whole point of both of these videos, the one that I did previously regarding my father, Bob Ingrum, and now about John Phillips Jr., is to thank both of them for all that they taught me and to honor them for what they've done for me and to allow me the privilege of practicing law with them. And you know, I should have done these videos a long time ago. You know, my dad's not in the greatest of health, and we started thinking about doing these at Father's Day, and we didn't get them done before Father's Day. And my dad's in the hospital right now. And so I wanted to put these videos out, so hopefully my dad can see it and hopefully John can see it and they can understand how much I appreciate them and how much I respect them. You know, I believe in being intentional and giving people their flowers while they're alive. You know, a few years ago, I wrote some thank you letters to some family members and close friends at Thanksgiving to tell them what I thought about them and how much I cared about them, and basically say what I would say about them if I was doing their eulogy. Because when I'm doing their eulogy, they're not going to be there to hear it. And I want them to hear it while they were alive. And that's why I'm doing these videos, is I want my dad and John to hear these things while they're alive and to understand how much I love them and how much I respect them and I appreciate what they did for me.